We want to welcome our listeners tonight to another part of our series with the Reimagining America Project on voting rights and elections and campaigns. It's called Silencing Voices, the Racialization of Representation. And that is tonight's discussion. So if that's what you are here to watch, you're in the right place. We have a terrific panel tonight. And before we get started with introducing them and talking about our series on voting rights and civic participation, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Rodney Sadler, who is going to join us by video. And it might be, he's got some background noise, but he is going to welcome us, introduce the Reimagining America Project, and start us off with a prayer. Before we turn to his video, though, I do want to acknowledge, I know that this video will be available for a long time on our YouTube channel, but today we are still in mourning from the news of a recent tragedy, a shooting in Texas with 19 young people, 19 elementary school children who have died. And so I just want to acknowledge the grief and the trauma and the sadness that we are all feeling right now. So I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Sadler. And what would a Zoom video be without technical difficulties? We'll try again. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Sadler.
Yes, we are having some technical difficulties. Please stand by.
Hello, it's Rodney Sadler, and I'd like to say welcome to you all tonight to this edition of the Reimagining America Project. We explore the issue of voting rights. I'd like to say that voting rights are perhaps at least as important now as ever. We have seen the erosion of voting rights since 2013. As we looked at Shelby versus Holder, and we saw what happened in states across the nation as soon as the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was challenged. We find ourselves in a really precarious place right now, but I'm glad that there are warriors like the people that you're going to see tonight on the screen who will talk about ways that we can fight against voter suppression, ways that we can get people to come out to the polls, ways that we can inspire voters, particularly those voters who've not been at the polls before, to get out and express their opinion. Our democracy only works if we all work together to overcome the difficulties that we face. As the Reimagining America Project, we are looking at the way that race has imperiled people across our nation over and over again. This is one great example of what we can begin to do to come together. I stand here today, I am enjoying some time with my daughter at Universal Studios in Florida. And what I see is an array of people of various colors and backgrounds and hues, speaking different languages with different sexual orientations, so many different backgrounds gathered together and functioning as one. It'd be nice if we could learn to do that as people too, and that's really the goal of the Reimagining America Project. May we begin to work together to bring about a better, more just, more fair and equitable America for all of God's children. God bless you all, and have a great night tonight.
And with that introduction and welcome by Dr. Sadler, we're going to turn it back to myself. I'm Jennifer Roberts, former mayor of Charlotte, former county commissioner, now one of the board members and on the steering committee of the Reimagining America Project. We have been working on this for the last 2 years during COVID and beyond, and we want to reimagine an America where race is not a dividing factor or a defining factor. So this is another evening in our voting rights series. Tonight, we're going to talk about the struggles that candidates of color face, that campaigns and representation and the political power that is connected to those campaigns and candidates when they win. We're going to talk about the obstacles and hurdles that revolve around race. We have an amazing panel tonight. I can't believe that we've gotten them all in one place at the same time, and they're all continuing to do amazing work. I'm going to introduce all three of our panelists at the same time, and then we're going to jump into our conversation. We have Dr. Amy Steele, who is the executive director of the New North Carolina Project. She is a former candidate for North Carolina House District 82 in 2 separate years. She has extensive K through 12 public school operation experience and began the New North Carolina Project in an effort to increase electorate and turnout in traditionally Black and Brown communities. She has a bachelor's in Spanish and K through 12 education, a master's in school administration, and a PhD in curriculum and instruction. We also have Cynthia Wallace, the co-founder and executive director of the New Rural Project. Cynthia co-founded her nonprofit after running unsuccessfully for Congress. The New Rural Project focuses on making sure the voices of rural young people and marginalized residents are being heard. She has a 25-year career in financial services and with expertise in risk management and regulations, and she's very organized. She was the 2020 Democratic nominee for the 9th Congressional District in North Carolina and has been very active. She has a bachelor's in mathematics and a master's of science in statistics from the University of North Florida. Finally, we have Ray McKinnon, who is the chair. Well, this says you're a chair of an Libyan Board of Commissioners, but you're also working with Lead NC. And he was appointed to fill an unexpired term of the Charlotte City Council at the end of this doesn't sound like you. Let's see. You're director of recruitment for Lead NC and co-director of leadership development with Lead NC Institute. He's also principal consultant for Repairing the Breach, consulting firm he started in 2020, and has served as the pastor of South Tryon Community United Methodist Church in Charlotte. He has 4 boys. So we're going to hear more about their organizations and what they're doing and their outreach. Ray's going to correct if I had anything wrong in that introduction because he's smiling. We're going to just jump right into our conversation because you all have amazing experience as former candidates and the challenges that you encountered. So why don't we just start? You've all run for different positions, state, local, federal. So this is really cool. And tell your story. We're just going to open up with, why did you run in the first place? And what were things that you encountered as a candidate of color that you noted that your white colleagues didn't face the same way? And I'm going to start with Ray, because I think I messed up some of your introductions. So
no, you actually did not. That was me.
Oh, good. Okay.
So as you said earlier, I ran for county. Actually, I don't know if you did say this. So in 2020, I ran for county commissioner at large in Mecklenburg County. It was a decision that was actually it was 2018, I think, the first time, somewhere around there. I think the decision was not one, unlike probably Cynthia, that I thought about forever. It was kind of the result of things that were happening on the ground. At that time, I was serving as pastor at South Tryon United Methodist Church. And that year, it was really, really cold. And it got so cold, we had, in our little church, we had people who were coming, literally being sent from the hospital in cabs, sleeping on our pews, sleeping wherever we could find a place for them to sleep. And And I felt like the county commission was just tone deaf. I felt like they were, we kind of went there, a lot of folks who were working on the ground, faith leaders, and kind of made an appeal. And at the time, one of the commissioners was, from my perspective, flippant and dismissive. And I felt like there wasn't somebody who was really speaking that to that need. And so I decided to run the first time. And it was an incredible experience. It was a humbling experience. And I think if I could do it all over again, I don't know if I'd do it differently, because I think running that first time, being firmly rooted in my why. So, at the time I was serving as a pastor, and I still am a minister. And for me, there were three things that kind of just kept ringing true: justice, mercy, humility. And so I ran because I felt like we needed to have somebody speaking in that lane, kind of from a faith perspective, but not one that was narrow, not one that, kind of brought my faith into the work from a justice perspective, and not a limiting perspective, telling people what they couldn't do. And so I don't know, that was really the impetus for me. And we can talk about some of the challenges I faced that I'm certain are different than the challenges my sisters here faced, because I'm a cis man. But yeah, so I don't know if that kind of answered it. But for me, the reason I decided to run was to have a view of our neighbors who were not being represented, even though we had people who shared our skin tone in those seats. I thought it was really important that we had to have a perspective that not only we had our faces at the dais, but we had all of our different perspective, all of our different challenges there too.
Thank you, Ray. And I have been to the church you pastored, and yes, you are right there in the community, seeing a lot of challenges that people on the margins face. And I appreciate that. Let's go next to Amy. Why did you run, and what were some of the obstacles you encountered?
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Mayor Roberts, and to my esteemed colleagues and co-panelists. I'm honored to be here. One of the reasons I ran was really to be a voice for teachers and educators across our county. What I faced was really this kind of attack on public schools and public education, not necessarily intentionally. The idea was good to reduce class sizes, but it really impacted schools in a negative way. And it made teachers and principals have to scramble at the last minute to make adjustments to class size. And that really harms children at the end of the day. It harmed the kids because their teachers were disheveled. Administrators didn't know what to do and how to respond as quickly as the state required us to. And when, I found out that the state legislative body were the ones who were creating this kind of culture of chaos, I said to my assistant superintendent, someone needs to fix this. And she said that someone should be you. And that's when I decided to run for State House. Now, I had no idea what was involved in running for State House. I thought, I could call 50 or 100 of my closest friends and they would all give me $100 to $500 and everything would be great. And that is absolutely how it didn't go. It was completely the opposite experience. I might have called 50 people and got $50 total. It was just terrible in terms of raising money. I wished I would have listened to the experts and people who were trying to train us on what we should do and not really try to make it my way, but just listen. And that was the biggest lesson I learned. And then on top of that, when you're a racially minoritized individual, so a Black woman in a predominantly white male dominated sport of politics, you have to do things differently. And so not being afraid to really bring my culture and my perspective into my race was something else I learned. And we'll jump more into all the things I learned while running while Black. I'll turn it back to you, Mayor Roberts.
Oh, thank you. And you're right. Our kids need advocates, absolutely, in our schools. So Cynthia Wallace, let's hear your perspective. And you ran for a federal office.
Yes, I did. And actually, Ray, it wasn't a long planned thing. So, I actually, so I grew up in a political family. My dad was a civil rights activist and a county commissioner. And so I grew up in politics, but as you went through my, my resume or my bio, politics was not my 25-year career. It was in financial services. I do connect my run though to an upstart senator in 2008, Barack Obama. I had moved to Charlotte a couple of years before with my job. And I literally, I guess 14 years ago, walked into an office in Charlotte saying, I'm a volunteer, I'd love to help and help him get elected. And from that campaign, which is I think one of the opportunities for some of our national campaigns today, they actually are how I got involved with local politics in Charlotte. I received an email from that campaign that said there's a precinct meeting happening near you. And I literally, an email pack rack among other things. I still have the email. And I said, what's my precinct number? I didn't know it. So I literally went to that first precinct meeting, and that's how eventually Ray and I got involved together. So got involved with beyond that campaign, got involved locally, and then also got involved with the party structure, and kind of fell into becoming chair of the 9th Congressional District in 2017. And that's where I really, got recommitted to my rural roots. Born in Southern Georgia, small town, 13% African American, and starting to do that drive down Highway 74 between Charlotte and Robinson County, Mecklenburg to Robinson County, really reconnected me with that small town girl that I was, and had some amazing opportunities that had brought me by way of lots of other places to Charlotte. And that connection with the people there, and really, seeing the needs and concerns that mirrored most of my family that still lived in rural Southern Georgia, really helped me understand the trials and the issues that were being that weren't being addressed by elected officials that had been elected year after year in Congressional District 9, the district I lived in that entire time. And so we did have a very challenging 2018 and an extra 2019 election. So I won't bore folks with it, but Google North Carolina's District 9 2018 election, and you'll understand. And so unfortunately, we did not win that second race, and I was the district chair, and I did get recruited. Folks did see my commitment to the district. They saw my commitment not only to kind of asking people to come to Charlotte, but actually going where the people are. So like the whole phrase, meeting people where they are, I lived it even as a volunteer. And I did say no multiple times. And probably a month before, 2 or 3 weeks before filing started, someone asked me if I was running. And I said, no, we'll have a great candidate. And the Claudia Sandoval, she said to me, well, I've heard it takes women 7 times to be asked before they say yes. And she said, what number am I? And I said, I'm asking you as well. What about you? Are you going to run? And she said, no. Literally a month later, and we were both telling the truth, we had both filed for office. So a week into filing for Congress, I was not running for Congress. But the needs of the district were so great, and the fact that while this district was gerrymandered, I had done a speech about a month or two before filing that talked about myself in relation to the district, which went from Charlotte urban on the west, out rural as you left out east, which was who I was as a born Southern rural girl, and had an opportunity to live in some fabulous cities like Charlotte. And so I decided to jump in and really try to put a voice to the folks that live in those counties, and in particular those rural folks that are often overlooked. And the diversity of our rural counties is also what is really overlooked. And so I wanted to be a voice for everyone in the district, but also in particular those voters of color, and highlighting issues of broadband and cell phone coverage issues and, low wages and the high, the cost of, student loan debt and what that meant to everyday people and their lives. And so that's how I kind of ended up in this race. And as Amy said, there are definitely quite a few challenges running in a pandemic. I can talk about that. Running while Black, as Amy you mentioned, I can definitely talk about that. Seeing how, the dollars that the person who ran ahead of me was able to raise versus, some of the challenges that I had in fundraising, in spite of also the pandemic.
Wow, 3 different experiences and yet a lot of similarities. And, it's interesting, a couple of you mentioned being asked and, Amy having your superintendent tell you, why not you? What role did mentors play as you ran? People you called up to say, how do I do this? What's the first thing? Who do I need to help, get me going? Was it hard to find mentors who could understand, the challenges that you faced? And whoever wants to jump in, we're gonna have a conversation here. So think about, the people who got you to run. Did they stay with you and keep helping you? Did you find other mentors along the way who were currently in office, or what did that look like? And did that seem hard, or was it easy? Anybody?
I'll say this, Jennifer. One thing I learned is you will be surprised the people who help you, and you'll be shocked by the people who don't. So that's one thing I learned, and it is amazing. And you just need to just know that some of the people you will never expect to support you will, and some of the people you thought would ride hard will not, and it's for various reasons. One thing that comes up for me though, I don't know if I'd call it this person certainly wouldn't consider me their mentee, but one of the people the first time I ran who I got their support that meant the most to me, I think still today, is Mayor Harvey Gantt, who, because like Cynthia was saying, I can track my even knowledge of politics to him from when I was a kid when he ran, and to hear that he knew who I was a really cool thing for this East Greensboro Dudley Heights kid. Like, this guy who I remember idolizing knew who I was, and he said something to me that that has stuck. He said, he was like, absolutely, I'm happy to support you. He said, but I'll support you under one condition. He said, if you are not successful the first time, that you'll run again, because we need voices like yours. And there is something that happens when you, because sometimes to be honest, I've sometimes felt like I wasn't always on the inside of the Black political establishment in Charlotte, because I was relatively new and didn't really know, I was kind of, and so there was something really validating about hearing this Black man speak that to me. It was really life-giving, and it honestly has been something that has propelled me far beyond that race, in a way that I don't think Mayor Gantt will ever understand how important those words have been to me. So yeah, I don't know. So he wouldn't consider me his mentee, but there is something life-giving that happens when somebody who you regard highly on levels sees something in you that that kind of validates that sense of call that you had in that moment, right?
Wow, that's great.
And I'll jump in. So because I've been involved politically, I definitely had worked on campaigns and, been almost, quasi campaign manager for campaigns. So I had developed my own kind of kitchen cabinet a bit. So I'd been on kitchen cabinets, and then suddenly I needed a kitchen cabinet, which is not a place I expected to be. And so there are definitely several folks that are part of that group that, are the kind of folks that you need that are going to give it to you straight, no chaser. And so I definitely had folks like Connie Green Johnson, that's a part of that kitchen cabinet that many folks may know. And also because I was running federally, one of the things that was a learning, I'd never run for office as well. So I never run for office, and I decide with 10 days left of filing to run for Congress. Probably as a risk manager, I don't normally take those kind of risks. So obviously there was a higher power part of that process. But I did, I was advised very early on to speak to the congressional delegation in North Carolina. And I, picked up the phone and called Congress folks I had never spoken to. And I don't know if they know my name prior to that. But of course, Alma Adams, representative, has been an amazing mentor and has provided a lot of wise words. And she actually was the first person, I remember we had this conversation in probably December of 2019. And she said, it's hard for Black women to raise money. She said, at least it is for me. And I said, oh, okay. I didn't understand that, but I have definitely told her many times, I definitely now understand what you meant. And also Representative Butterfield and Representative Price. So they were the three Democratic members of Congress at that time. All became just really amazing and welcoming mentors through the process to me. So I was, I really didn't feel that I didn't have mentors and that folks were, in my corner. That there were definitely other challenges, but that was definitely something that was incredibly helpful, having those folks currently in this space, taking my phone calls or answering my text messages, etc.
So I'll jump in and say briefly, when I started, I didn't really have a mentor. My assistant superintendent, when she told me, why not you? She wasn't necessarily recruiting me because that meant I would have to quit my job. So what she was doing was kind of saying, if you want to fix it, fix it. But for now, you need to fix your school and fix these class sizes and just move these teachers around. That's what she was saying. So I wasn't recruited, no one asked. And, point of reference or point to note, if you do want to recruit candidates to run for office, go start with people who serve already, teachers, social workers, other, people in communities that are already entrenched in advocacy. Don't always go to like the political places to find people, because sometimes people in those places don't necessarily carry the servant's heart. They carry different things and they have different skill sets, but you can find a lot of value in places like public education, public health care, things like that, areas like that. So when I got in, I didn't know diddly squat. I had no knowledge. So I had to go to training. I went to training by Lead and See, by Emily's List, by Lillian's List. And going to that training really helped to set the stage for what else I needed. Then I started getting connected with other women, Black women, white women, Latinx women, Asian women. Those women provided a context for me, being a mom and a woman running for office, that I never, ever, ever could have imagined. And we provided support one to another. That was the first cycle. The second cycle, I had the same group of women, but I had to find my tribe. So I started talking to different people, and I will never forget this encounter I had with Chief Justice Sherry Beasley at an event in Charlotte. And I walked up to her and I said, I'd like to talk with you if possible. I said, my name is Amy Steele. And I was saying it so deliberately just to make sure she heard it. And she said, I know who you are. And I thought, oh my gosh, the Chief Justice of North Carolina knows who I am. That was big news to me. And from that moment, she became my mentor. And she didn't know it, but I love her. And I think she's quite an amazing woman who showed me how to really run for office with grace, with poise, with dignity, and all sorts of other things. And so shortly into the cycle of 2020, I was contacted or, had some encounters with Pat Timmons Goodson, who was also a justice running for office. And together we decided to start having a weekly call or a biweekly call with some other Black women who were running for office. That went from 3 women to 20 on the regular invitation list. And we started supporting each other each week, every Thursday from maybe 8 or 9 at night until And we supported each other on all those things that are all things campaign. So fundraising, connecting with how to talk to donors, call time. I'll never forget another candidate was on the call and she received a call back from someone and she was off microphone, but on, video, and we could see her, haha, laughing and rocking back and forth. And we were like blowing up the chat. Are you asking that person to max out? Make sure you're asking them to max out. What are you saying to them? Come off mute so we can hear you. It was just so funny. But all of us were like encouraging her in her call time as she answered this call, but we were right there to support each other. And that's the kind of thing you can build when you're running for office, especially as a woman of color, because we have to have community. We thrive on that. And that is what builds the bridge and helps us to make it through such a difficult process of running for office.
Wow,
And
you
I was
guys,
excited to be invited to that group of women on a weekly basis. So
no, that's great. And yeah, those who are watching, these folks all know each other. And clearly you all have created a great community. And it's so interesting that, Cynthia, you didn't get, when you saw an African-American man running for president, that got you interested. And, it's interesting. And women, of course, women have a huge challenge. Politics is traditionally a man's world. And so you have like that double whammy. And Ray, it's interesting that you talk about the Black political establishment and being kind of an outsider to that. It's great we have a Black political establishment, right? Because 30 years ago, 40 years ago, Harvey Gantt didn't have that to turn to, right? So we've made some progress, but you also mentioned some other challenges. And I'd like for each of you to think about an instant, a story or two, where you really were confronted with people who judged you by your race, or something that just hit you in the face, not literally, but just surprised you or reminded you that this is still largely, the people in power are still largely white, and that this is, something that we're continuing to work on. Oh, Amy's got a good one. Amy,
Oh boy, this is my favorite. The 2020 cycle, people just didn't believe me that, the mail and the emails and the, ads were as bad as they were. And so I used all the negative mail on me, against me. There was more than $1 million spent against me. And I laid it out on my dining room table. And I showed that, it was bad. And so one such picture of me that was used on one of the mailers was a picture of me. There's two pictures, distinct pictures that showed, race, right? And I knew it was about race. So one showed me a picture I'd made at a kickboxing place that my cousin took me to, and we were kickboxing and having a good time, and I was trying out the facility. So I took a picture of me with my boxing gloves on, and they showed me with, my Facebook picture with my boxing gloves on, and I had punched supposedly a white man. And so he had a black eye and he had a neck brace. And so basically they were trying to portray that I was violent. And so if I was elected, I was going to be violent because I had boxing gloves on. So took the picture completely out of context. But my favorite that tops it all off was during National Gun Violence Awareness Day, or, Gun Safety Day. I was wearing orange and I had 2 French braids going down my hair, and I'd had my hair braided. This was during COVID, so I learned how to braid my own hair. And then I braided my braids into 2 French braids, and I took the picture. And so they said that the caption was, she's too mean or too much of a hard person to run for office. Like, why would you vote for her? And they highlighted, you could tell like this image was specifically selected because of my braids. And so when we get into talking about the Crown Act and how Black women already feel about our hair, and how, Mayor Roberts, you're here today, you're adorned in your curly curls and they're beautiful. But if I wear my curly curls, then it's a problem and I'm a threat. And all of a sudden there's an issue with my hair. And so these are the types of images that are portrayed in political mail and political ads that make it difficult for Black women specifically to even want to run for office, because I'm a protector as well. My husband's a protector, I'm a protector. and I'm a high D on the disc profile. So you're not just gonna, skate over me and just expect to get out unscathed, right? It's not gonna happen. So I don't fight, unless I have to, but I will. And so when you have these things happen to you when you're running for office and you already want to avoid conflict, but conflict comes and knocks at your door just because you raised your hand and said, I will run, then it makes you not want to run again. And these are the kinds of challenges that when race is brought into politics in this manner, it makes people decide that they don't want to run.
Wow, those are tough images. I was just thinking, I kickbox. I actually do it for exercise. And one of it wasn't a campaign picture, but it was a cartoon someone did about, that was actually complimentary, which is so interesting, how things can be taken differently and used against you. Cynthia or Ray, you're still thinking? Ray?
Yeah, I don't have a specific story like Amy lifted up, and I do suspect that one, I was running for a county commission, and two, I'm a man, and I think the way obviously people relate to women is different than they relate to men. But I think one of the things that, interestingly, I had to overcome that I think was connected with me being a Black man, but also a Black man who was a minister, were some of the assumptions about kind of what I would support, what I wouldn't support. Specifically, especially when you got in the northern towns, I think there were some expectations that I was going to be anti-LGBTQ, that I wasn't going to be pro-choice. I got a lot of questions to that effect, and of course, on one level, I understand it. On one level, I get it. And the irony is that I don't think so many of our white progressive friends understand the tropes they are entering into. I don't think they understand how they are playing into what they don't think they are. And these are racial stereotypes. Because I was a Black man, because I'm a minister, because I'm this, I'm that. And I get where they come from, but it's just I think an opportunity for all of us to stop and ask ourselves, where are we informing stereotypes, and where are we perpetuating them?
So I have a couple of examples. So the 9th Congressional District, I believe, was about 65% white. And so in the primary, there were 3 Black candidates and 1 white candidate. And so some of the discussion was, should she run and should she win? And she's not, she's Black. And I have a good friend in Richmond County that said, she's one that told me those things she was hearing. It wasn't a surprise to me. And she said to them, do you want to do the same thing we've been doing? Have we won with any of those white male candidates? The 9th Congressional District, this district hasn't been represented by a Democrat in 30, 40 years. And every other candidate prior to me as a Democratic nominee was a white man. Or other than you, sorry, Ms. Roberts, I know you were a candidate as well. So they were white, they were not a person of color. And so that was definitely some of the conversation. And despite those things, I got 56% of the vote against 3 male candidates, might I add, in that March primary. So those were not issues. And there are other candidates like Lauren Underwood in Illinois, who, is representing a district that is not, a minority district. So that was one of the things I heard. And also, I think the fundraising, I often said that, one of my platform pieces was the gender pay gap, and how, that hurt families, that hurt the economy, et cetera. And I liken the fundraising to the gender pay gap. You know, white men get the largest share of the fundraising dollars, then white women, and then down the line. And, you know, when you're doing this fundraising, and Amy can attest to this, you're looking at these, you know, sheets, and you see, you know, how much candidate X, Y, and Z they've received of the dollars. And so this district that was, you know, was lost, I believe, by about 1,400 votes in 2018, all of a sudden in 2020, with lines that were actually a little bit better, some of the fundraising calls I made, they said, do you think we can win that district? And I said, well, I wonder if, you know, I didn't say that to them because I'm being polite, but I wonder if they thought that when they gave previous candidates $10,000. And, you know, the same folks might give me 250 or 500 if they did say yes, but they thought it was winnable. And it was potential, you know. And so I think that is something that I, you know, will challenge some of our, you know, progressive friends is, you know, as people say, budgets show your values, your donations show your values as well. And so I would, you know, ask folks to kind of look at their own personal donation sheets and see what that reflects and what that means. And that was definitely very clear. And last thing, my finance director had never worked with a Black woman candidate. And she has become like one of the largest advocates because she worked and had called some of those same donors and saw the responses that I was receiving versus other candidates she'd worked in with those same lists.
Yeah, the
Can I say-
fundraising. Oh, go ahead, Amy.
I was just going to say, can I say this about fundraising? So
Yes, please.
I detest call time. I hate it with the strongest passion. And so one of the things that I saw, going back to that congressional district that Cynthia ran in, I came across, and I love Dan McCready. I think he's quite amazing. So I came across Dan McCready at an event, and I said, Dan, you know, you've been running for like 20 something months. This has to be the longest election of your life. And everybody was gathered around him. And I said, how are you still doing call time? And he said, you know, I'm not doing call time. I prefer to do events. And it hit me that everyone raises money differently, but sometimes the rules are way different for certain people. And it's not that he was, you know, negative in his perspective and what he was doing. He was doing exactly what he should have been doing. He was doing events, and he was thriving doing events. But it did make me think, why am I not doing events? Why am I being forced to do call time? And some of the women and I, we talked about that. You know, what is it about us that makes us have to play by all the rules all the time in order to be a good candidate? But men don't have to play by all those same rules to be considered a good candidate, and also to get the money and all of the things. And thank you, Ray, to prove myself. Well, I'm done with that. I don't have to prove myself to anyone. I've already proven myself to God. God called me to do this. I'm doing it. I said yes, and that's all there should be. Now, it took a while to get there, but that's where I am today. I don't have to prove myself to anyone, but that is exactly why we're put to the test, those types of tests, to prove ourselves to whom? Heck, I've already had 5 kids. If that doesn't show you strength, I don't know what does, because a man can't do that. I'll stop there.
Now, I will say, Amy, the other thing that
Wow.
I've learned, hey, kudos, 5 kids. I mean, I think drop the mic on that. So first of all, and I've often said to Amy, I'm like, when do you sleep? 5 kids, other companies, and the North Carolina project. But I also will say, I think it is also symptomatic to, you know, our structure in this country, you know, and, you know, when I started running, you know, like I said, I had 10 days advance. I didn't spend years raising money and, you know, cultivating donors. So I started at like literally at, you know, at the, you know, at ground zero. And so I think also, you know, because of the structures, I didn't know a lot of millionaires. So a lot of this money is about who you know, and that makes the conversations and the calls not as cold. So I think that's also part of the process, that if you already know a lot of people of wealth, then it's an easy conversation. So it doesn't probably feel like call time because you're calling your parents' colleagues. You're calling people who knew you from when you were a child. And so I think that is also why, the call time might even happen, but it's not as hard. And it's a 2-minute conversation, of friends talking. So it may not even feel like call time because you already have a relationship with people of wealth. And so I think that's the other thing that happens to candidates, and why candidates that don't, a lot of times you see the candidates, they already have money. So that's why candidates that have money also are the ones who win, and also are the ones that raise untold amounts of money on day 0.
Ray, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I think that's definitely it. Like it's so the organization I work with, Lead and See, one of the things we do is recruit and train. Amy talked about that, but one of the big challenges that Cynthia talked to just there is that network. Everybody acts like if you raise tons of money, it's because you put in a lot of call time, but Cynthia hit it on the head. It's about the networks. And one thing I will say, Jennifer, one of the best pieces of advice I got as a new candidate did come from you, who I must say when I ran was really supportive. You said, Ray, make a list, 100 friends who'll give you $100. You'll start out. And I was like, and I did it, and it worked. And I started out, we had 90 days to run a campaign, and we raised a ton of money that first time, but it was because that spider webbing, and then people who maybe I didn't know, but I had, for whatever reason, I connected. I was a DNC member. I connected with folks up in Davidson because I went to a precinct meeting when it was snowing, and they all had, and then at that point they connected with me, and folks in Davidson got behind my campaign, did fundraisers. I raised a lot of money, but Cynthia hit the nail on the head. It wasn't because I was able to pick up that phone. It's because somebody else was able to say to some person whose name I don't know and I should know, some Davidson professor who opened their house, and that one event I raised, $8,000-9,000, right? That I didn't do anything for, and they in-kinded everything. And that's another thing that I've thought about as a man who was running that race, is that first time I didn't have the hard time. The second time it was harder, and I think it's because I recognized in my first race how limited my campaign was, and that's thanks to people like Cynthia, who helped me say, hey, I get it, and you need to expand and see where you had limitations, and ask yourself why, and then answer for it. And so the second time, the money wasn't as easy to come by, and that was interesting.
Yeah, the financial aspect of running a campaign is so central, and it doesn't, it's not a one-to-one correspondence. Just because you raise the most money doesn't mean you win. And sometimes, not raising a lot, you can, but it certainly helps a lot, because you can't have flyers, you can't have people canvassing, you can't have signs. You can't pay for any staff unless you have some money. And absolutely, those networks are really important. And I'll have to say, my example that says how different this is, a friend of mine who is a white man, who ran for office, part of a law firm, said he sent one email around his law firm and raised $25,000 like that. And yeah, I thought, wow, wouldn't that be nice? White guy, first time running, and that happened. And like you said, then you build a network, and people who know people, and a lot of folks get to a point where they don't have to make the calls. Their finance director can make the call, and they never have to actually talk to the person, or they can go into an event and be invited by someone you don't even know. And that is a huge challenge. And I think about the centuries of people of color not being able to get home loans, and not being able to, have inheritance, and all the things that white people have had in their background for centuries. that gives us a head start. So yeah, money was definitely one of my questions. What about things like district lines? Because I know that North Carolina, we've had a horrible history of gerrymandering. We've had lawsuits where lines were drawn to, was it surgically try to exclude Black candidates and to exclude Black voters. I know that Ray, you ran countywide, but other two ran in districts that were gerrymandered. And I would love to hear your thoughts about, how that really harms civic participation and makes Ray's job harder convincing people to run in the first place. So
That part.
Amy,
Yes.
Amy, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So I will say this, that, gerrymandering is terrible. It is horrible to prison gerrymander, which is what's done in North Carolina. It's really a negative, it's a negative thing to experience when you're trying to run and you're trying to figure out where your streets are and things like that. And I believe the Republicans tried to gerrymander me out of my district the second time because I own 2 homes and they didn't see, my name wasn't on one deed, but I still own the home. And I believe they thought that by cutting my street in half, which they literally did, they cut my street in half, but I was still on the side of living in the district. I believe they thought that they were actually gerrymandering me out of my district the second time. Now, they may not have, and it just may have been a fluke, but if I know what I know about surgical precision and North Carolina maps, I'm almost convinced it was done on purpose. So gerrymandering hurts. It also confuses people. I told this story in front of the hearing committee for gerrymandering here in our state, and the story goes like this. A person called me and said on election day in 2020, why are you not on my ballot? I voted for you in 2018. And I said, I'm not on your ballot because I'm no longer in your district. And they're like, what do you mean? You were just in my district. You came to my house, you this, you that, your campaign this, your campaign that, you called, you texted, you sent us mail in 2018. And that person was an infrequent voter. So our campaign got them to vote. But yet in 2020, I was out of their district. So it confuses the voters when you gerrymander and you constantly change districts. Our districts change so much that people get confused, and a confused mind always says no. It's if you don't K-N-O-W, you say N-O. If you don't know, you just say no. And that's what happens. And confusion is a trick of the enemy. And that's why gerrymandering hurts so bad.
Yep. And the 9th congressional district, as I mentioned, started from, South Mecklenburg and went out to Robinson County. So you're talking about a tier 1 county, and tiers in North Carolina aren't. The lower the number isn't better. So Robinson County is in the bottom, number 2 in the most impoverished counties in the state. And then you get out to Mecklenburg in a, top 10 of the, best economically stable population. And you're also talking about different climates and different issues. And so this is a 2.5 hour district from one end to the other. So you've got, this disparate issues and concerns of the people. And that's one of the tricks of the gerrymandering. So there's, how are you going to represent folks who have such different issues and concerns? The size of the district makes it hard for a candidate to represent or even try to campaign in those areas. And so that is definitely one of the tricks and the issues that happen with gerrymandering is you have these people, that are just so different. And so one of the, the positives, which is why we have to get out and vote in November, is the judges. And I said it, I was on something else. Don't forget the judges. And in 2020, there was a significant drop off in voters when it came to the judges. And we lost Chief Justice Beasley, who lost her race by 401 votes out of 5 million. And those judges recently pushed back against some of the partisan gerrymandering, which is why we have the districts, though they changed a million times, we have probably some of the fairest districts maps, not perfect maps, but the fairest that we've had in a very long time, because judges recognized that they were done with partisan gerrymandering. And so when we encourage folks to get out and vote in November, there are Supreme Court seats that are on your ballot that are critical, that folks don't vote at the top and then walk away from the voting booth. We've got appeals court judges that are on the ballot. So I just want to just put a plug in about this upcoming election and how important and critical it is, not only for a Senate seat and House, North Carolina House and Senate races, but also down to our judges. It is critical that we vote the entire ballot as well. And that's part of the education that I know organizations like mine and like Amy's that we will be doing, is ensuring that folks understand what's at stake and what is actually on their ballot and why it matters to them. What's the impact to their life by their civic and electoral engagement, and going up and down that ballot, starting from the top and finishing it out.
And Cynthia talked about the fairer, much fairer maps we have now, but they're only valid for 2 years.
Yes.
They're gonna look at them
The
again.
congressional ones are definitely, so in 2024, you might have another district. And so I'm with you, Amy. There are people that have sat in the same home in one decade from 2010 to 2020 and lived in 4 different or more congressional districts or Senate districts.
I've
You,
been
lived you never moved.
Yep. I've been in 3 different districts and I've, yeah, I haven't moved. It is
One thing-
confusing. Ray, did you want to add?
Yeah, one other thing I think that maybe we haven't hit on that I think from my perspective is one of the, I think the biggest impacts of gerrymandering is this climate we have, because everything happens in the primaries. It forces us to be our most extreme self. It forces us to not have to compromise, to not have to really work together, right? So if you are only, if the decision, and that's, I mean, listen, I'm pretty progressive, very progressive, and I want us to get as much as we can. And I also think this gerrymandering is what has us where we are, because you don't have to find a way. We don't have to come and reason together because the decision is made at the extremes. And frankly, at the very far right extremes in one party, I don't believe there's parity. I don't believe, we have the extremists on the left. I mean, we can't even get universal health care on the left. But on the right, you've got this thing where you have to be your most extreme self, and they can only do that in seats that are tailored drawn for them. Because if they knew they had to appeal to a broader base, they'd knock this stuff off. If they knew that, they don't believe some of the stuff they're saying, they only are saying what they need to hear to say to get the vote, right? And they can only do that because of this partisan gerrymandering that is eroding our democracy. It is eroding our ability to do anything. It is the reason why nothing is likely to be done from the kids who are slaughtered. And it's partisan gerrymandering because they don't have to come together. We don't have to reason. And I know I sound hyperbolic and probably crazy, but I think it is what has ruined us. And if we don't figure it out, to Cynthia's point, but for those justices, I don't even want to think where we would be right now. And if we lose it, if we don't get Irvin and Inman back on the Supreme Court, if we lose more ground at the Court of Appeals, it doesn't matter what happens at the federal level. It doesn't matter if we get Amy and Cynthia, those folks, because the justices, we see that we have justices now who are outright partisan, especially in North Carolina. Look at Berger. I mean, it is out in the open. And so we better open up, wake up, and see. And I'm really happy that Lead and See with other folks are looking at those things too. So anyway, I'm sorry for, hopefully I didn't bring it down, but it's like.
Well, I want to remind people that the Reimagining America Project is a nonpartisan organization, but we do know that that political parties and race, that there is a connection, and that's something that we have to be honest about. And so, even though we are nonpartisan, we recognize that the challenges for a person of color in the Republican Party are even harder. And that there is one party that has more diversity than the other. And that's just, just looking at numbers. But the justices and the judicial decisions are so important. We've heard that in the rest of our voting rights series. We had a professor and some other legal scholars talk about how important the Voting Rights Act was and how devastating it was when they removed the pre-clearance, and that all these voter suppression laws have come into place since then. What I want to do is we have about, we're going till 6:45, so we have about 12 minutes left. And I like to have some positive aspects to what we're talking about, because we know the struggle is real, but we also know we've made some progress. And the fact that you have mentors, the fact that you could call a Harvey Gann is awesome. So what I would like to ask for maybe the next to final question, what advice would you give to a young person of color who is interested in making a difference and having a voice and running for office? What hints would you give, and what encouragement? Ray, you do this all the time, so why don't you start? Give us your spiel.
Well, the first thing I would do is advise that friend to contact us at Lead and See, leadandc.org. We are also nonpartisan, and really, honestly, I mean, I really do wish I had something like Lead and See, because it helped. It gives a foundation about what to expect. What are some of the barriers that you overcome, and all those things. And I think the piece of advice that I would give, kind of a personal thing, is to really, especially, is to stop and take in the moment. Running for office for me felt like a sacred trust. It felt like this thing that was hard, that was tough. And in the middle of it, as hard as it was, I was able to feel and experience, especially in the first race, a grace and a sense of calm and calling there that I hadn't, and it gave me the opportunity to actually look around and see how many people the vision resonated with, how many people were supportive, and to not have my identity wrapped into, and because of that, because I was rooted not in me getting elected, my identity wasn't wrapped in winning the election. Success, I wanted to win, obviously, but that sense of being able to bring some community together, that sense of being able to grow myself was incredible. So in that moment, find the stuff that you can glean from, and not just think that it's an experience, not just to win. It's an experience, I think, an opportunity for growth, personal growth, and moving forward. So that's all.
That's terrific. How about you, Cynthia?
So one of the new rural project, part of what helped us found this organization and kind of the data behind it are the almost 60,000 folks that did not vote in the 2020 election that were under 40. And so our organization has started around 7 rural counties that are down the South Carolina border, going east from Mecklenburg County. And so that is definitely a part of why we started this organization. And so the ways we are going about it is to, try to meet folks where they are. Our organization is focused also on those voters of color And when you think of, Black voters, there's a traditional mindset that you find them in the church. And you do, but if you're looking under 40, that is not where they live. They live in different places now. And so our work is to identify those folks and get them engaged at the local level. So we've launched our barbershop conversation series called The Fade, Fruitful African American Discussions on Empowerment. And we are finding the young Black men in the barbershop. And one of my favorite stories from that work, we've done our first one in Anson County, and there was a 30-something-year-old Black man who came to our first conversation, and because of that setting, he left that meeting with a prearranged meeting with his county commissioner, something he had never done. And he met with his county commissioner. He has talked to his town council person, and that 30-something-year-old young man sent us a picture with his I voted sticker on, because he had not changed his voter registration. He was registered to vote in Guilford. So we're looking for him. We're like, wait a minute, he's not registered to vote. He's like, oh, I'm registered to vote in Guilford. It's the last week of early voting. We said, well, you can't go back and vote in Guilford because you live in Anson. So you've got to go tomorrow. And he literally texted me the next morning and said, hey, here's I voted today. I said, well, send me a picture. And he sent me a picture with a sticker. And that person, like, he is already working with other members of his community to start a voter initiative themselves for their own county. And I believe that this is going to be a young person that will be running for office. He is going to be going to his county commission meetings. And so I think that's part of it, is showing voters. And that's what Helen Post Mills, who co-founded the organization with me, that was at the grounding of our decision to start this organization, is to show people that voting connects to your everyday life. And there is more to civic engagement than that once a year vote. And so that's what we're doing with our civic education in the barbershop, is going not only talking about voting, but talking about your county commission meetings, your town, your town commissioner meeting, or those other boards. And what we're doing in that work is engaging and creating civic ambassadors. And we're seeing that already show fruit. And so our hope and goal is we're going to see some of those young folks that we're working with, they are going to be the names on the ballot. And so that's how we're kind of looking at it. And I, really am hopeful. I see Alexa Roberts, who is our program director, on the line and has done an amazing job helping us uplift and launch that program.
Well, I can feel the energy just leaping through the screen right here. You guys are in boxes, but let me tell you, you're not in the box. You are out. So Amy, let's hear your great pitch, because I have actually walked neighborhood with Amy, stumping for a candidate, and she's terrific. I have heard her pitch, and
Thank you.
Yeah, awesome.
So my advice to anyone running for office is this: get your financial house in order. Because here's the deal. If you decide to run for an office such as state house or state senate or anything higher than, council of state on that level, you may be encouraged to quit your job. You may need to, go do fewer hours or have, more of a part-time role on your job, or just do something different. You also may come into contact with people on your job who say, they don't want you to run for office. And so you have to make a choice. If you don't have your personal financial house in order, it will be very, very hard for you to do certain things. And there may be some times where you have to pay for things from your personal financial savings or what have you, just to be able to make it to the next, fundraising type cycle. So you want to have your personal house in order so that you can make some different choices. What I love about just seeing candidates who've shown me how to do it, and candidates who are financially independent, or candidates who have some financial, like they've saved up a little bit of money, they didn't just decide without having any kind of funds ready to go. It could be $100 for the filing fee, or $200 or $300. But what I've learned from candidates like that is that they can make different choices. And when you're in life, I've been the kind of person who had $2.50 in my bank account. I've been that person before. And I'm not ashamed of that experience because it taught me to plan and to do better. And you wouldn't believe that right now, but I haven't always been this person. It's been a process. And so, growing up, not having much, not learning about this kind of stuff, about financial health, about financial wealth, independence, things like that, you don't know. And when you find out, and you do differently. And so I've done differently. And, when you're running for office, if you don't have your personal finances in order, everything about the campaign will kind of throw you off. So you got to be ready to handle that. So that's the one piece of advice I would give before a younger candidate decides to run for office.
And one thing that, and I'm sorry that I know we've got 2 minutes, but one of the things that Amy mentioned was about the job. And one of the best pieces of advice I got from 2 different people, one, a former city council person, he told me when I was thinking about running for office, he said, the first person he talked to was his wife, and the second person was his job. And I took that to heart. And actually, months before, there was some thought about running, but not for this particular seat before I did run for Congress. But I started those conversations with my boss months before I ended up running for office. And so when I told her, hey, I'm going to run for office, I'm probably filing in a week. There was a ground laid. So, but the other piece was I was running for a federal office. So then there was a lot more conversation because I worked for a company that was regulated by the Federal Reserve. And so they did have to think about it a lot more. But I do think, as Amy was saying, that preparation, though, part of that really should be for anyone of any age, especially if you are, not self-employed, you should be talking to your employer about, or your manager, because there are, as Amy mentioned, maybe some things that have to be different for a period of time while you're running. And so I say that to anyone who is not independently wealthy or self-employed. Speak to your employer very early on into the process to make sure that they're aware that your life is about to be a bit different.
But I don't want to give people the impression that you have to have tons of money to run for office. You have to, because you don't. So I don't want to scare people off because that's sometimes what people think.
Especially if you start local. If you start with a local district for your city or your county, that is an easier bar to start with. And a lot of people do start local with a local district and then see if they can maybe move up later on. But I could listen to you all night. But I know that we and people need to get to dinner, and we told you we'd be done by 6:45. So I just want to say on behalf of the Reimagining America Project, all of our listeners, all the people who will listen in the future, because I'm sure a lot of young people of color who want to run for office are going to listen to this and be encouraged and be excited and hear some mentors they might have. And you can please put your organizations in the chat so everybody can see about New North Carolina Project, New Rural Project, and Lead NC, and how to get information from them. Somebody else also asked about information on the judges. Amy, thank you for putting that in the chat because so much is available online, but it is daunting. And when you are African American, a person of color, a woman, it's an even higher hill. But you have left us all with energy and encouragement and words of wisdom, and it is getting better, but we still need to pay attention because we can slip back at any moment. In terms of representation does matter. It makes a big difference on our policies. It makes a big difference on who gets listened to, and that's how we have good government. So I just want to thank you on behalf of the voters, on behalf of everything you're working for raising these issues, for working hard, for continuing to be engaged civically, for getting, we've all 4 of us on this panel have lost elections, so we all know what it's like. And you keep going. Life keeps going. It's not how many times you fall over, it's how many times you get back up. So thank you all so much for being here on behalf of the Reimagining America Project. Look at our YouTube channel. Go to YouTube, look at Reimagining America Project, and you can see all these conversations and more. So as the slide says, if you missed an event, the recordings of our voting rights series and other Reimagining America Project events are on our YouTube channel. It's very easy to find. Please share those. Please use them to encourage others. We want to reimagine an America where race does not divide us. Thank you all for your time tonight.